Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, bots and cons, to Tech Talk, the officially unofficial Transformers TCG podcast. I'm joined, as always, by Scott of VectorSigma.info, and this is now the second half of this particular week's recording, in which we're going to cover the orange spheres and our thoughts on where they stand within the Siege II metagame. So without much further ado, please enjoy. So moving from there, let's talk about orange stuff. So we were just talking about wide blue. Let's talk about wide orange. Bugs is still here. They're roaches, I guess. They're never going to go away.
Sure.
I mean, they. I think to your earlier point that a combination of factors led to a number of things led to the fact that orange still succeeded. Obviously, the decks are still good. There are new iterations of old decks. There are new archetypes. I think other factors went into it also, like you said, people maybe misjudging how specific blue decks play into orange decks and vice versa, as well as were there people that consciously made the decision to say, all right, like we said earlier, if no one's going to play orange, I'm just going to take those cards out and improve my matchups against other stuff. What are your thoughts on this, Scott? What are the new players here? How do you think this sphere evolves? Do any of the things I said just make sense?
Well, let's start with the older one. So I
Sure.
think the issue with Insecticons is basically like, again, you can improve 4 to 5 cards every metagame, and the deck just gets better because the characters remain the most efficient things you can do at those cost points.
Right. We haven't seen clear and true replacements for those where it's like, yeah, don't even bother playing bugs when you could do this other combo.
Right, but for example, like I feel like walking into an event and depending on shrapnel to block a bunch of hits against what should be a concentrated blue metagame makes for a bad day, I would think. But like, again, of course, it depends on what your matchups are. Facing off against a lot of other orange decks, it remains powerful. If you're facing off against a lot of orange decks that aren't packing direct damage like we saw, which I can't fathom, you're still going to be at a serious advantage, an even more advantage, especially when you combo in cards like energy transfer, cards like
energy transfer is presumably a blowout if they're not running burn.
Right.
I'm gonna assume that you just ruined someone's day by playing that.
Right. So again, like given that situation, that's what you're going to run into.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like the deck remains, it can still even beat a lot of. It still remains powerful even within the aggro realm, not even just the sphere, just because it is still efficient character no matter how you slice it.
Yeah,
and giving it certain cards is only improving that. So it remains very powerful, very much like if you ignore it, it's going to beat you type of thing.
Absolutely, it's still a powerful threat that you have to respect, whether it's this or other wide aggro decks that we'll get into.
And it remains the best for the battle cards that are in Insect. A lot of the time, it is the best whatever that card is deck. Like in my opinion, outside of and these are pretty much non-existent now. So I guess the only one that's left at this point as a non-combo nature, it's the best piece through Tyranny deck, in my opinion. It's the best I Still Function deck because I think it's pretty much the only one that runs it effectively. It's obviously the best energy transfer deck because it's the one that runs it, etc. So
yeah.
So like even though a lot of other aggro decks are running these cards, it remains the best version of those, and because those battle cards on their own are so powerful when they work, you can just continue to do unfair things by abusing their battle cards.
Absolutely. I mean, as you said, barring a great upheaval, I mean, I'm laughing at people in the chat with the resident sleepers about bugs, but you still have to think about bugs. You gotta give them the respect they've earned at this stage.
Sure.
So, other thoughts from you, Scott, about this particular sphere, or do you think that is the sphere at this stage?
No. I think the wide airstrike patrol decks are better than decks. I think they're better positioned in the metagame than Insecticons is. Although again, it may be specifically to Insecticons. I think it's strategy in general.
Hmm.
I think the Vegas results bore that out, and then we still have Blaster.
Right. Which
but I think
oh god.
but I think the wide airstrike me in various incarnations are the most interesting as well as
For sure.
most powerful of what you can do.
I do have to wonder just in general if the airstrike mechanic wouldn't have been a good wave 1 thing, and neither would Blaster for that matter. But
It'd be really bad without the green card.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't work out okay for them.
Yes.
But let's assume a bunch of things flip scenarios. Would people have so much hatred for Blaster as they do Bugs if Blaster was first? You know what I mean? Or is it just because these ideas are fresher that they don't get quite the vitriol surrounding them? Idle musing from me, that doesn't necessarily have to be a talking point, but
no, I think the issue is more that I think people feel that the Blaster deck was still at the whim of the battle deck, per se. So you still have to get a decent flip off of playing the card for free, as opposed to your characters just being better than others at their cost, and having. I think the big thing why people think it's unfair with Insecticons is because you have 5-drops with 12.
I could accept that as a reasonable explanation.
And no other deck can field that. And again, I think this is a lot of where the way that the game was created, and having the star cost, not like you can't just divide power by star cost and come up with like the most efficient deck possible. Like the deck has to work together. So the reason why Kickback swings for that much damage is because you're playing an Insecticon deck. He doesn't see play anywhere else.
Well,
so
yeah,
but that's the point. Like you can't just stick him someplace. So it's not like he really costs 5. It's like he costs whatever the Insecticon deck costs. Like it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
And it's the same thing with the cassettes. Same thing with Blaster. Their cost is basically like whatever it takes to build the deck, and it just happens to work out that because there's no other way that you can run these characters together.
Right.
So it just doesn't work out as well. So that's where I just feel that that's where a lot of people find vitriol for it, and it's just and I don't want to say it's a lack of understanding of how it actually works, but it's just it takes a lot for somebody to get that, to understand that, and like it kind of just doesn't.
Well, I mean, that only goes so far to, soothe your ego after getting thrashed by it for the umpteenth time. Yeah. Now that the deck has been around forever, but that does logically make sense and is a better explanation than probably what I would have come up with. So, so to bring it back to the spheres discussion, the 4-wide blue stuff, as you indicated, seems to be suffering a bit. Do you feel that this particular sphere overall is comparatively suffering?
No, not at all. Like, I do believe that the airstrike patrol, and not Insecticons, but I do believe that the airstrike decks have a chance of beating the 3-wide aggro. I mean, I'm sorry, 3-wide control decks. Just by nature of having so many characters at the same time. If this is where, again, like the 3-wide control decks have to be running range cards, or else kind of don't stand a chance, because the characters you're being attacked with don't have stealth. I mean, I'm sorry, have stealth at various times. So, like, if you're not trading, you only have one character that can really trade with one of theirs, so the game automatically drags out.
Of course.
If you have a 4-drop that's attacking you, like, I don't know, 7 or 8, or like with 7 or 8 base plus upgrades and actions, you know, you really can't compete with that by swinging back with a flame wall. It's like,
Yeah,
so,
it's just not getting the job done.
right. So again, I think there are ways that the battle decks of the 3-wide control decks can adjust themselves to respect these decks a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're purposely slanting yourself matchups in your main deck, and even either not at all or in your sideboard, or just not effectively in your sideboard, it's not going to work out well for you. Because I do think that even though they are favored over them, even though in my opinion, the 3-wide control favored over them, if they're not built correctly, this is exactly what comes into play. But specifically in this case for the wide airstrike patrol decks, I do believe, however, that Insecticons are extremely worse against 3-wide control than they used to be in the past.
Gotcha. I mean, it makes sense given the way things have borne out as well. So we have some evidence to support that.
Yeah.
Any other things you wanted to add for the wider orange stuff? I mean, I have it up here as 4-wide aggro. I guess hypothetically there's 5-wide plus variants as well, but
I guess the only other thing was somebody brought up, and again, this is all subject to like what people played against, but I know there was, like, for example, another deck I think went undefeated.
Another patrol deck, you said?
Yeah, like offer patrol with them. Like that. I know that there were different 7-drops being represented with airstrike, shrapnel, and
yeah, that one I did hear about. The shrapnel one I remember seeing, or like watching the game, but I remember seeing people posting about it afterwards.
So the 4-wide patrol, whether it be off-road or airstrike with a 7-drop, is an option to go, or the 11 or 12 drop with the other guys was another way to go.
Right.
Whether it's with star cards or so. I think those are where I would focus my attention, as opposed to, you can fix Insecticons if you want. I just believe that there's almost nothing to make themselves stand out against a 3-wide aggro sphere, unless those 3-wide control sphere, unless those 3-wide control again aren't running.
And that's more of a factor of what they're doing or not doing, as opposed to anything that, as long as you're a reasonable bug stack, it's up to them almost as to whether they're prepared. I mean, it is up to them whether they're prepared. It's up to them as to what your matchup is going to look like, is what you're saying. Correct.
It's not really up to you. Like, I think you should expect to be walking at a serious disadvantage. So if you're expecting that to be a large majority of the meta, like we are, myself, focusing more on the patrol.
Gotcha. So I think that'll probably close it up for the wider aggro stuff. We'll be closing up with the taller aggro stuff, I guess, and then moving into any other sorted stuff that we may have missed or want to revisit. So 3-wide orange things. I know I played against, there was a lot of springers running around, aside from combo-oriented ones. So there were just straight-up springer aggro decks. What else do you feel falls in here that's either a new player or is going to catch people's eyes?
I mean, obviously the general prime, the Sentinels, Ian deck, falling as well as tanks that I still don't think are very good, but people still like them. So,
look, I'll say tanks are fun. It's fun to hunker down and just be like composite armor, but I don't know if that's enough.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, that being said, I think as we could recount ourselves, I mean, it's fine now. I mean, we can admit it. Like, we didn't find in playtesting this to be a sphere that we could find a deck that was good enough, to be honest with you. I
mean, there were some that showed promise. I will say there's some that I want to revisit now that we're not in crunch time. But yeah, overall, it wasn't working out.
Well, like, for example, I heard, and this might fall also something that we didn't talk about, but can kind of bridge the gap between the two. Like, and I heard an interview earlier today, which I'll echo as well. Cars decks would go here, and they seem to be extremely poorly positioned in this metagame, given the results that I heard.
I would tend to agree.
Yeah, so despite them getting a lot more ways, especially from maybe there's just something there that hasn't been discovered yet. It seemed like they were extremely poorly positioned.
Yeah.
So, like, that's one situation. I still think this sphere suffers heavily to wide aggro, which as stated earlier.
Yeah, there hasn't been
powerful.
a breaker there to flip it around. I mean, there are of course ways like bolster tricks, or if you decide to run your own ram horn, or there are other ways to try and cheat force field effects to try and do it, but it's going to be inconsistent compared to, well, they just start with 4 guys. You need to draw the things that you have to find.
Right. So, I mean, the main power that this remains should be against the 3 wide control decks.
Right.
And the problem here is it remains an uphill climb because the cards that the control decks received are just simply more powerful options the aggro decks got. So, like, you have to find ways to run some of the or, continue to run, in my opinion, things like One Shall Stand. I just don't think you can get myself up to 17 isn't happening. Like, I just don't think that's a strategy that works when your opponents have 20 and 21 and 17 health.
Yeah, you're not just obliterating Battlefield Legend on the other side in one shot, right, and then going, all right, good luck beating me with Flame War and Hot Rod. Like, that's not the scenario that it's coming down. It's, you tagged me for 15. I still might have 14 more health to go at that point.
Or I might just block 8 of it pretty easily.
Exactly.
Like, through use of secret actions and things like that. So, and ubiquitous secret actions that should be seeing play across the table.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of easy. It's easier for the control deck to answer than it is find answers that don't exist.
Right.
So, like having to go to 2 tall to me is not a winning strategy against when you should already be ahead in that matchup to begin with.
Well, that was one of the spheres that I was going to ask you about, since it's literally not on the diagram. 2 tall orange. Obviously, we saw that become a post-board strategy, but based on that statement, it doesn't sound like you're a fan of the entire idea.
I mean, I guess I'm on record saying I wouldn't do it I wouldn't have sideboarded that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just easier for things to break right for you as the 3 wide, pouring a lot of damage on, especially when you're using those specific character lines. I understand why it works out. Like, you could have big flashy numbers, and I do think against Shockwave, it's a little more advantageous to go that route than it is against.
That makes sense.
Say any of the other, because the damage output, you're winning through discard, not getting up to gigantic numbers like the other guy.
Right.
I guess I would have to test it against Jetfire. I would have do that.
I mean, obviously, without testing it, I can't really speak intelligently to it. The entire premise, the first time that I saw it in action was on Championship Sunday. So, again, it's just quantity of games, but I see your point where it's, again, on paper, you should already be an advantage. Going to those lengths does not bode well. For the sphere as a whole, I mean.
Yeah, I just don't think it's necessary, and I think you're already in it. So go that route. But on the flip side, I don't think that means you change the sideboard. I just because there are certain ways where it's powerful. I just think that this again, I think, goes into play where there is no. I think the major factor here there is no, especially a tournament that was the first time with the meta, is because there was no clear winner in a sphere, for example, if you were even thinking in that. You kind of were like, well, I did this against A, so I should also do this against A1. And that's not always going to be the case depending on the matchup.
Right. I mean, the logic I follow. It makes sense. Again, if you're looking at it from a sphere perspective, they roughly, like we were talking about earlier, Prime, Jetfire, Shockwave, at the 10,000 foot view fit into the same bucket. But because of the nuances of each of those decks, doesn't quite always play out exactly how it does on the whiteboard.
Yeah, because ultimately, if you are only left with one character, you're at a significant disadvantage to the one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I see it. Whereas if you start 3-wide, main 3, if it becomes 2-on-1, in all likelihood, the 1 is heavily damaged because it should be your major target. But at the same time, you should be an advantage to be able to put out 2 attacks per versus
Makes
them
sense.
only.
Right. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go into it because you have to throw out the individual games to some extent just because there's a lot of weird things that could happen in a specific instance. But point being is that these are all generalities as people are listening to this, just to put that out there before people, jump to any conclusions on that front.
It's just a way to keep it organized.
Right. So beyond all of these spheres, or was there anything else you wanted to add on 3-wide orange before we step away from that?
No, I still think it remains the most undiscovered country, if even something exists going.
I really feel like there is something, but that of all of these, you'll probably disagree, but I feel like the 3-wide against wider orange, there's such a gulf that you have to try and cross that I don't want to say it's unwinnable, but it always feels that way when I'm playing it as compared to some of the other matchups where they're bad, but this feels worse.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that I think there are ways to adjust what seemingly was a bad matchup in the of wider aggro versus 3-wide control. There's ways to probably work on that matchup to your advantage as the aggro deck than it would try to find a 3 aggro, because I just
yeah. I do find myself drawn to a lot of them because of specific characters and certain lineups or certain battle cards, but I know haven't found it yet. We'll see what the future brings. So among the things that we didn't touch on, do you feel that there is or do black pips influence any of these spheres? Do you think that there's an independent one? Anything along those lines?
not unless something takes me by surprise. No, I think the best use of those would just be to use them as a smattering within.
As a supplemental, as opposed to I'm playing a black pip deck.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes, I don't think that you should be leaning into, I don't know, there's 5 double black pips or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, as you the caveat that my for attack Pierce 4, did you all you really basically did against, let's just say you ran up against a 2 defense aggro deck, all you really did was flip 2 armor.
Right.
Their 2 defense couldn't help you. If it's against blue, you basically nullified their flip. So I think we need the meta to get to a basically either you're going to be facing more control than aggro, or you specifically, when you do face aggro, facing aggro 2. And I don't know that we're at that.
Yeah.
For that to matter.
As a whole, since we had mentioned it earlier when we were talking about a combo sphere or just combo in general, that it appears that it's supposed to be, the scissors for the paper of control decks. I'm a little, I mean, I get and again, I don't want to rehash the whole argument. I understand the concept of everything is on this linear axis of do more damage, do less damage. And then this is, okay, this is completely perpendicular because it's doing something totally different. But I'm surprised that it wasn't a black pip deck, quote unquote, is not the thing that changes the relationships to keep those control decks in check. Maybe just mathematically, because like you said, you need a lot of things to go right for you to even be keeping pace. So maybe just that strategy as a whole is never going to work out. But it is just taking a step back, looking at the game as a whole, that it's interesting that that element wasn't pushed more to try and counterbalance the increase in control decks.
I think because ultimately, unless we somehow, and there aren't a lot of these, like a lot of white black cards, or like, I don't know, playing flame, whatever the black flamethrower is or whatever.
Oh, a smoke thrower.
Yeah, like let's just say you hypothetically had a double black pip deck.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just very difficult unless you were able to guarantee yourself getting to Pierce 4, 5, 6 guaranteed on every single hit.
Mm-hmm.
That like it ever makes sense that you should lean into that strategy as
and the
just
problem
getting incremental amounts off of other.
Yeah, it seems to fight itself, because even in that scenario, let's say you could reasonably expect to hit Pierce 6, just somehow. I don't know how, but let's say you could. So you need a 6 attacker.
Right.
Like base, without help, because some of these cards, like some of the cards you're playing would have to go in there. Why aren't you just playing an orange deck and then buffing the 6 attack guy to 17, like we were talking about earlier?
The Pierce chart remains heavily slanted towards going one direction.
Yeah, it's
because the sweet spot just doesn't exist. Isn't
right. Yeah, it's unfortunate that you need that perpendicular line with the combo decks. Or unfortunate, it's not the best way to phrase it, but the fact that you couldn't do it with the black pips, I think, is unfortunate. Not necessarily that it has to be combo to be this check on the power level of other strategies.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I get, like you were just describing, I don't know if it ever could be that way without, like, the game going back and rebuilding it from the ground up kind of thing.
I mean, I don't think we can push like triple black pips. It's like that. Too much without like star cost.
Yeah, it gets weird. There are actually a fair number of double black pips that don't require stars. Obviously, they're, like dual wield is not fantastic outside of mercenaries, but you could hypothetically run a lot before you start looking at star cards.
Oh, of course. It's just a matter of, like you said, having to have a large base attack to begin with, and why would you just not to attack out of it?
Yeah, because if you're not hitting, to your point about if it's a double pip, as in white black or blue black or whatever, you're not getting that other benefit. Half of your combats are going to be super weird. So,
and the cards remain, in my opinion, under their equivalents on aspect.
Yeah,
so to me,
as actual cards.
Almost overvaluing the
right.
Even right. Limited is a completely different story.
Well, that's what I was about to say. There's a reason for that. Limited is a thing, from what I've heard. The word on the street. So aside from black pips, there was a question in chat that I'll bring up in a second.
Were black pips asked about? I wasn't even sure.
Yeah. So I guess.
Okay.
So the question was, could we reach a critical mass of orange or blue / black cards to change it? As in, if we have enough, I'm interpreting it as if there are a gazillion more steady shots that are reasonable cards that are dual pips, would that change? And I think yes, but at that point, isn't it just a blue deck that also has Pierce, or, what I mean?
Right, like this is like the Octone Terror, essentially. So,
right.
like,
I think at that stage, you're just modifying, to bring it back to spheres, you're modifying the components of the decks in that sphere, but you're still a 3-wide blue deck. It's just you have a million Pierce cards.
Yeah, again, the problem is until we have marksmanship that's black or armed hovercraft that's black and things like that, like it's not.
Or characters that justify, when you what's the character's name? Flamefeather, the Firecon that effectively turns oranges into blues on defense. So if you had somebody that it turned black pips into oranges or blues when it was doing one or the other, then that could change it.
I mean, if you had an airstrike patrol black, it would have the same way as well.
Exactly. But we don't have those.
No,
so
not right
we
now.
are a little trapped at the moment.
Yeah.
So aside from the black pip piece, that was significantly harder to say than I thought it was going to be. Were there any other spheres that you think need to exist? Any other decks that are going to justify their own, or any other overall comments about the idea that you wanted to add?
No, my suggestion would just be to concentrate your playtesting if you're going to any events recently on the top 8 decks. Understand the relationship between them. It should bear out the way we've just discussed it, but if you find something different or different plays allow you to do different things or different sideboarding options, it might hold true. But at the same point, like that's where I would start playtesting. But I do believe that, this is a extremely healthy metagame. I feel like there's a lot left to be discovered.
There are a lot of cards I still want to play around with. Like I just didn't get
because the battle cards are because both the characters and the battle cards in this set are just so powerful. There's no way that just one tournament can define what's going on with this. So
right. And there could be undiscovered play patterns even within the decks that we've seen, or other ones that it's, if I just do this, that's what changes the matchup around, sort of thing.
Right. And we admittedly, obviously haven't play tested every single card, every single...
If anybody's telling you that they did, they're probably lying.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had some of these decks going in, obviously play tested against different versions, but even the play test different versions of these going forward, so.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're at an hour 40. I was going to say an hour and 90 minutes, but we're over that, so never mind. Anything else you wanted to add before we close up shop, Scott?
No, we have a local qualifier coming up for charity on the 20th of December at Games. The charity is going towards our favorite co-hosts, which we didn't hear tonight, I might add.
Ooh, yeah, you're right.
Going towards the rescue where I found them, got them, whatever you want to call them.
Where they rescued you, Scott.
Yes. Yes, as puppies. The rescue's been taking on a lot of harder cases recently, and there's been a lot of heavily vet bills that I see on it. So, and we weren't able to. Unfortunately, the Toys for Tots charity that we were able to last year, you have to basically drop off all the toys by December 15th. So we actually make deadlines, given the store's limitations. And by the time we got in, life settled down and all that stuff. So it will be a PPG tour qualification event, as well as half the entry. I think definitely a decent part of the entry fee going to charity. And in case we don't get enough people, we will make sure that we supplement to give them a decent donation for the holidays. So
awesome.
Hope to see you on the 28th if you live locally within any radius. Otherwise, hopefully we will be getting news soon on what is going on for 2020 from an organized play perspective. But I do know that there are some things being worked on behind the scenes to kind of just get some information out there. And then hopefully by the next time we record, given the holiday season, we may have some Wave 5 information. I don't know.
I'm a little surprised we didn't get any teasers at the Invitational, to be honest.
Outside of conversation.
Yeah, we didn't have like that. I think it was for Wave 2 that Windblade art at That
Yeah,
was at
that's
PAX,
true.
right? Like even if it's something
Yeah.
as simple as that. But we'll see. So yeah, like Scott was saying, if you can make it to this event, great. If not, there's plenty of charities that are worth investigating and worth donating to or volunteering with. I know it's that time of year. Even if it's out of season, a few months from now, they could always use help. So I think that will do it at this stage. So
I don't think you're gonna make it.
No, I got to close this up quick. As always, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And please tune in next time for more Tech Talk.